So welcome back to continuation of our program. What are the main challenges to regional security? Who poses external threat and what are the potential sources of internal instability? Answers to these questions will be jointly asked, sought by the highest officials in charge of this region from the United States, European Union, Germany, and Romania. So the speakers in the next panel, entitled Western Balkans in the Global Disorder, Common Approach to Regional Instability and External Threats, are His Excellency Christopher Hill, Ambassador of the United States of America to the Republic of Serbia, Manuel, German Federal Government Special Representative for the countries of the Western Balkans, Adrian Davidoiu, Special Representative for the Western Balkans, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Romania, and József Pandur, Political Advisor to the European Union Special Representative for Belgrade-Pristina Dialogue and other Western Balkans regional issues. They will be moderated by Simonida Kacarska, Director of European Policy Institute. Mr. Sarrazin will join this panel online.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you all, and thanks to the Belgrade Security Conference for the invitation. We kick off immediately because we have 60 minutes, and I think this is one of the most exciting panels, not because I'm on it. So we kick off with actually reflecting on the title of this panel. So I would ask all of the panelists, starting with Mr. Sarrazin, thanks for joining us online, despite health issues from what I hear. Sending you best wishes from Belgrade for a speedy recovery. Where, in your view, is the place of the Western Balkans in the current global disorder, as this is the title of the conference? I would ask all of you to keep to 3 to 5 minutes, please, for the interventions. Mr. Sarrazin, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Simonida. Of course, the panel is the most exciting because you're moderating it. At least your moderation is a kind of exciting threat to panelists who tend to speak too long. Sorry for not being with you, but I have school kids and it's autumn in Germany, and I think the rest is explaining itself. Would be great to be with you in Belgrade. Well, I read your question, and I mean, this could be a long elaboration on where the world is standing, how new forces are taking over, how about Russia, China, and so on. And then I decided to have this comparison. Perhaps the Balkans is a region which already decided for good old Mother Europe, but still is not stopping looking after other ones. And we as Mother Europe, we just try to avoid that you're falling in love with the other ones, because then you will come back and cry at our shoulder. I know this quite for sure. I think this is the state of the art. And of course, Mother Europe also says that you have a long experience with us now. You know us quite well. I mean, some of our things you also don't know well, but it's not the fresh thing. You already know that sometimes we are also making mistakes. Sometimes we are stupid. European Union is a magic instrument, which is not easy to explain, but not magic on the first sight. I think this is the state of art. And so I see the region in a kind of standstill regarding reforms, being very busy with crisis, which is elaborating, and in a certain extent waiting for big things to happen, where the region thinks it will be in the circle, in the center of big things to happen. And I'm not so sure if this will, I'm unfortunately not so sure that it will be like this. I think the situation in the region is not as bad as it was some decades ago. And this is why a lot of people are, also quite patient with politics. But I think in the moment we are in the fear of missing a lot of opportunities and a lot of options, which perhaps in 2-3 years, we will all look back and think like, why didn't we use this time to really come up with something to get it fixed? This is my assessment.
Thanks, Manuel, for that. We move on to Ambassador Hill then.
Well, I guess it's the fate, some would say the duty of American diplomats always to be offering places in the European Union. In fact, it's not up to us, but what we do need to be is very supportive of what the European Union is doing and trying to do in this region. Anyone who thinks these issues here in the Western Balkans are easy, they ought to come here, and you can be here for 5 minutes and you realize they're not so easy. I must say, I come from a perspective of having seen these issues, for example, at the Dayton Peace Accords, later at Rambouillet, something I'm trying to forget, but I was there. And at that time, there was a real sense that the Balkans was really one of the fundamental puzzles of the security architecture in Europe, and as such had, I think, a real primacy of, people would wake up and think about the Balkans and go to bed and I guess have nightmares about the Balkans, but there was an understanding that it was kind of the -- issue. I think today we've seen that in this global, I think you're calling it disorder, there are a lot of other situations that are difficult for people to give exclusive focus on the Balkans. And I think sometimes the complexity of the issues here has exceeded people's patience in trying to figure them out. So I think it's been important that the European Union and the United States try to come together and figure out how we can support each other and make sure the Balkans do end up where they really are geographically, in the center of Europe. The EU, of course, has a lot of sort of normative conditions, and it's understandable because in any good club there should be some standards. And so I think it behooves all these countries of the Western Balkans to go through these conditions and do their best to achieve them. I think to some extent we have to be respectful of the fact that these conditions are kind of hard to meet. And no matter what you think of the quality of someone's democracy, ultimately politics is a tough thing. It's in every country. It's not just in advanced countries. It can be in very unadvanced countries. So these are not easy issues to perform. I remember being in North Macedonia, and I remember a philanthropist came and visited and told the prime minister, you need to do this, 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 and this, and by the way, I've got to go catch my plane. So the prime minister took him out, and he went off to someplace, I don't know, Vienna or someplace. And I remember the prime minister said to me, for this person, he gave me some perfectly sensible ideas, but I'm the one who has to try to implement them through a parliament that hates me on a good day, let alone a tough day. And I'm the one who has to try to make them work. So I think we do have to understand from a sort of empathy, from that perspective, how difficult some of these issues are. Kosovo, there's a reason it's still an issue, to put it mildly, and that is it's a very difficult issue. And I know people can look at Serbia and say, come on, Serbia, get over it. It's over. You have to understand that Kosovo is an independent country, so you just need to accept that and move on. Think about the future. I wish they would, but I think it's more complex than that. At the same time, when we talk about kind of the fundamental challenge to reduce tensions and deal with each other, we have to kind of encourage both parties to listen to the other. I know these are lessons you're taught when you're 6 years old. It's valuable to understand where the other guy's coming from, and I don't think there's enough of that here. Frankly speaking, having been in Dayton and listened to people who otherwise were from complete opposite camps, I thought there was more of a willingness to listen. So I think this is a problem. But right now, I must say, we have an issue that has to be resolved. One, we need to understand what all happened back on September 24th and hold people accountable. And when we do that, we can help prevent it from happening again. That's a key element. Second thing, we have to make sure there is so-called de-escalation. That's become a bit of a cliche. It's essential because when there's escalation, escalation usually brings with it emotion, and with emotion you get miscalculation, and it's dangerous. So there needs to be de-escalation. And finally, and I think this is absolutely critical, that whoever you think is responsible for this, whoever you want to blame, whoever you want to talk about day and night as the culprit in this, ultimately we're going to have a political solution. There's simply no other way. And I'm setting you up, József, for a political solution here, but we need to sit down and figure out what's fair. I think the European Union negotiator has put together something pretty good, and this is basically the concept of some kind of status for the Serbs in the north, this Association of Serb Municipalities, in return for greater internationalization for Kosovo. I think both parties need that. I think these are the right elements to be on the table. You might bring other elements, but for now, this is the right way to go, and I hope we can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Hill. I think this is, so we have Mother Europe, fundamental pieces of the puzzle, and the political solution. I think this is a good point to bring in Mr. Pandur, if it's okay at this point. So how do we make this fundamental piece of the puzzle actually rounded up?
Well, as Ambassador Hill said,
yes, thank you.
and I also think that the European Union put together a quite good agreement, common known as Ohrid Agreement. And what we need now is the implementation of this agreement. As also Ambassador Hill said, what we need now from the parties, first, especially from Pristina as a first, to establish the association of the Serbian majority communities. And parallelly with that, we expect from Serbia to deliver what he's agreed in Ohrid, step by step, parallelly with the process of the establishing the ESM. So, yeah, this is a very important puzzle, and unfortunately, we're back to the crisis management instead of implementing the agreement, especially after the 24th of September. And I fully support what Ambassador Hill said, that what we are expecting now, we have to know what happened exactly, and we are expecting, as the European Union said, as HRVP Borrell said many times, also EUSR Lajčák said that we are expecting to those who committed this in Banjska to justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For where I come from, Ohrid, having been an agreement that we signed, is very important, so that kind of rings a bell. Mr. Davidoiu, you come from the other end of the EU, actually, where the geographical and mental references do go a lot to the east. So how do you view the Western Balkans from the Romanian perspective?
Okay, so basically, as it is a stage setting, I will try to make some general comments in this stage. We are coming from the east, indeed, but east has become a new center, gravity in Europe, also to the unfortunate events that are occurring in the region and to the fact that we are reshaping actually the European security and the European development into this region. And let me tell you just a few things. First of all, it's about history, it's about geography. And from this perspective, these are data, and these are immutable data. So the Western Balkans is an integral part of Europe through its history and its geography. But it's also about reality check, and reality check that means political and geopolitical reality check, strategic and geostrategic reality checks. And we have at least two elements in this equation. On one hand, we have the institutional and the value framework of Europe. That is the European Union, that is NATO, that is a transatlantic partnership and the great support of our American friends. It's the support for Europe, but it's support also for this concept. It was a vision, and we shouldn't forget it, a vision of Europe free, whole, and at peace. So this is something we should go back, particularly as we see this this unfolding crisis at our region. And I remember in 2003, in the happy moments, the European Union, when drafting the European security strategy, was speaking about a continuum of security throughout the Union and at its borders. We are seeing now a continuum of insecurity, and we do not want the Western Balkans to get part in this continuum of insecurity. So there are premises here, and I told you, so we have one hand the institutional framework, on the other hand, we have the spoilers, we have the international stage that is now moving, and we have a lot of things that are moving in the direction of breaking the principles and the values upon of our international law and international order was founded. And definitely the Western Balkans should be on the right side of this process together with us.
Thank you very much. Going back to Mr. Sarrazin, any reflections on what you heard, but with a couple of caveats from me. The continuum of insecurity was mentioned, and definitely what probably since this program was actually printed, we've experienced Palestine and Israel and then Ukraine. In comparison to these situations, how much would you rate the significance of the Western Balkans or the difficulty of resolving the issues in the Western Balkans from an international community perspective, or from where you stand? For you, Manuel, these are very important conflicts. But if we look at the broader picture, isn't this supposed to be a bit simpler, or maybe we can think of something more constructive or more clear? Mr. Sarrazin.
Well, for me, of course, the Western Balkans is the biggest and most important topic on the globe. And as more people see it like this, as more safe my job is, actually. So, but of course, it's in a way, on the one hand, it's true that the center of the European Union has shifted in a significant extent to the east, also showing that also Eastern countries are not free from domestic campaigning on that topic. And I can call out to my Polish friends, which I know very well. I think that to a certain extent, I mean, there's the story that Bill Clinton was in the 90s first against NATO enlargement because he said, like, what is about Ukraine? And that, like, this missing link of the 90s, this one of the core countries of the East, which has been left together with Belarus and to a certain extent some important cities in Russia behind the Iron Curtain even after it fell. This link is now coming up, and to a certain extent today we have a new Iron Curtain which is at the front line in Ukraine. The situation already before, living on the one or the other side, or in Mariupol or the other side from the front line, was already really different, and I think this is a new point. And I think that for the Western Balkans, it's clear that they can be one area where, you know, trouble can be made as part of a bigger game. But it might be also like, in the end, it is not the decisive game. I think the outcome of the war in Ukraine will be more decisive for the Balkans than the Balkans are decisive for the outcome of the war in Ukraine. Even besides, there is some ammunition delivery from Western Balkan 6, but also from like broader Balkan region. And of course, also the Western Balkans is not totally irrelevant. I think what one has to understand is what the ambassador said, the location on the map. And this is why it's really decisive for European Union. The old story about Cyprus for Turks is that it's like the soft belly under the country. And I think this is the same for us. And having this big interlinks culturally, historically, between the Western Balkans and us, and also the tendency of migration, it is clear that for the European Union, the Western Balkans is one of the core questions. Nobody on the globe will believe that our model of development, of a common market, of values, of democracy, has any chance to sustain the global competition of orders if we are failing even in Sarajevo and Belgrade, because you are so close to us. So why can we not deliver even there? I think we can give up to deliver in Sub-Saharan Africa or somewhere in Eastern Asia if we cannot show that, we can deliver on that, you know? If one mayor in one town hall in Leposavic, not going out of the house, the mayor's house, is stopping European Union from being successful, like how shall we deliver on the world scale? Yeah, so I think the Western Balkans is small, it's unbelievably complicated, as also Ambassador Hill said in his first 5 minutes. but it's necessary for us to deliver if we want to sustain our role in the global competition, also as a strong partner in the transatlantic alliance.
Thank you, Manuel. Can you just be more clear? When we say deliver, what exactly, can you give us an example? What is it that the EU needs to deliver?
I think the most important point is political will to develop a common way towards European Union with all six, and to create rule of law and pluralistic democracy. I think in the moment what is missing the most is political will.
Okay, thank you. Ambassador Hill, you are very acquainted with the region. We focused a lot on Kosovo, Serbia with the messaging, but how far can we actually look at all of the sources of instability or the conflict in the region as separated one from the other? So can we look only in Kosovo and Serbia and not look at North Macedonia, the northern part of North Macedonia, or Bosnia within?
If you're trying to approach an issue that puts some people to sleep, but which really energizes me, that is regionalization. I really think there needs to be much more regional cooperation. I think in this regard, there's an effort by the countries themselves to come up with open Balkans. Probably too much mistrust in that because they're not able to attract all the 6 Balkan countries. But there's also an issue that, or an approach called the Berlin process. Probably needs a new name. I mean, I hate the word process, but in that regard, this is an effort essentially to get all the countries to subscribe to certain standards. I think it has a lot of promise because I think the real issue is, to get Serbia and Kosovo to agree on something, it's often they look at it as a real zero-sum game. If I'm giving this to you, I must be losing and you must be gaining. But if they do it in the context of a regional association, they're not giving it to the other partner here, they're giving it to their membership in the regional association. And I think while it didn't directly address regionalism, I think the negotiators, Mr. Borrell and Mr. Lajcek in Ohrid, and I agree with you, I have such fond memories of Ohrid. I hate to talk about it as some kind of unfulfilled agreement. But I think what they did was they kind of turned the negotiation a little from one where Serbia and Kosovo have to give up things to each other. Rather, Serbia had to do certain things vis-a-vis the European Union, and Kosovo has to do certain things vis-a-vis the European Union. And I think this kind of approach is probably better suited to difficult issues whose antecedents go way back. Finally, and to be a little more direct about your issue, your question, we're all concerned about whether all of these countries are making progress. We all worry about, what is the situation in Bosnia? Can it work? I would argue fairly strongly, actually, that the Dayton process is a platform on which a lot of good things could happen, good things for all parties. And remember, when you're trying to fashion an agreement that makes everybody happy, you're probably ending up with something that makes everybody equally unhappy. But I think the Dayton Peace Accords provided a platform for both entities, for the 3 constituent peoples, for all the complexity of it. I think it was the right way to approach it. And so I think it's time maybe for some tough love. Certainly, we just need to see, countries understand this is what they got. And by the way, factor endowment and politics. I mean, you take what you get. You can't say, oh, so-and-so has a better deal. You take what you get and you try to make it work. And I think everyone in this region has something to work with, and I'd like to see a lot more progress. And very fundamentally, I'd like to see the United States and the European Union be prepared to move quickly when we see progress, and not give them another homework assignment or give them a situation where they don't feel that tough decisions they're making are being received. So I think everyone's got some work to do on all this.
Thank you. I'll toss again a question to Mr. Pandur, but from the perspective, the same question, but from the perspective of the European Union. Can we treat these crises as separate one from the other, or do we need a bigger strategy for all the hot points in the region? That was where I was headed.
Well, from the point of view of the European Union, well, let me say that Ukraine and what we are seeing in the Middle East reminded us that integration and close cooperation builds not only prosperity, but also strengthen peace and stability. And Ukraine actually brought EU integration, EU enlargement back to life. And opened the window of opportunity for the EU neighbors and for the Western Balkan countries as well to join the European Union. We seemed impossible for a long time, maybe what seemed impossible for a long time maybe be finally possible now. Well, a year back, nobody could imagine that the EU is capable of finding the required consensus for such decision and in such short time. So I think that the war has made enlargement political again. And the Western Balkan countries has to use this opportunity.
Thank you. We thought, from where we stand, we thought the door was, or the window was open for us for some time, to be honest. But let's toss that question to Mr. Davidoiu. Has the window been opened now, or was it closed for the last 20 years when we thought?
No, I really think that the window was open starting with 2003, with the Thessaloniki agenda, and it was never closed. There were ups and downs in the process. There were a degree of either political commitment or lack of commitment in some moments. There were internal issues that the European Union has to address. There were a lot of developments in the candidate countries, some positive ones that have been acknowledged and some negative ones, and some negative trends that even developed from these developments that we have to face. But we have to understand that in the end, it's a sort of much closer issue to us and an internalized issue to a certain extent what is happening in the Western Balkans if you compare with the geostrategic developments at our borders that are really bringing into question the fundamental issue. In the Western Balkans, probably, if I can be colloquial, it's unfinished business. So the region has been on this path for quite a while time. There are a lot of underlying tensions here in this region, mainly based on ethnic issues. The ethnic agenda is something that we really have to look very closely and how to transform the identity problem into an identity win-win situation. I don't think we should necessarily, if we are still focusing on ethnicizing both problems and conflicts within the countries, between the countries in the regions, we cannot go much further. So definitely there is a political angle of this perspective, and this should be turned political. And we can see that this would become beneficial in the case of Bosnia-Herzegovina, for instance, where we have this major problem. In the case of dealing with the overall issues between Serbians and Albanians and the specific case of Pristina and Belgrade dialogue. So basically, we have seen all the developments, and we have to realize, like it was said before, so it can be either a win-win solution or a completely lose-lose solution, so there won't be an underground, middle ground in this respect. So either we make everybody to understand that to compromise, to political willingness, and to ownership, because this is something that I really think that needs this union. Besides the fact that the European Union and all the other allies and partners and facilitators in this process should continue to show commitment and engagement, the ownership of the Union is something, of the Western Balkans, of their leadership is extremely relevant, because if we don't take this ownership very seriously, this is a dual process. It's a process that we are embracing the Balkans, and the Western Balkans should strive should go through a transformative process. And it's even more important, I would say, from a perspective of a country that has been through this. Sometimes it's even more important the way to get to the European Union and the substantive transformation that you have to undergo than actually being there.
Thank you. I would open, we're right at half time, so I would open a bit earlier for questions to push the panel a bit. We have Mr. József here that I see, so we can collect a few if there are more in the audience. I would just ask my colleagues, sorry I'm doing this a bit earlier than you probably were planning to, but to pass Mr. József a microphone. Please, it's coming from this side, from the other side, here. Yeah. Any other questions that I need to fit in at this point? I don't see anyone. Please.
Thank you, Simonida, if it's working. Thank you very much. Edward P. Joseph, Johns Hopkins University SAIS in Washington, D.C. Question, please, for Ambassador Hill. A question, Mr. Ambassador, that I hope you will agree is fair. So you said, and others have said, that we need to know exactly what happened in Banska, north of Kosovo, on September 24th. Don't we know exactly what happened here in Serbia after September 24th? And that is, don't we know that President Vučić chose escalation, even though the Serbian Orthodox Church immediately distanced itself from this operation and expressed condolences only for the loss of the Kosovo police officer, didn't even mention the 3 Serb attackers who were killed. And instead, we saw President Vučić immediately, instead of meeting you and your Quint colleagues, met with the Russian ambassador. 3 days of mourning, incendiary allegations throughout the media. And then escalation, serious armaments, serious enough, alarming enough that the White House had to express concern about it. A few days ago, one of your State Department colleagues stated that Serbia is the #1 source of pro-Russian disinformation in the region. In June, we had the abduction of 3 Kosovo police after Albin Kurti had been harshly criticized and not Belgrade whatsoever. And not to mention adverse conditions here for civil society, media, and democracy in general. So my question for you, Ambassador Hill, is the same point that you raised about Albin Kurti, when you raised the question of whether he is a partner. Is Alexander Vučić a partner? And is calling him a partner, if he is not a partner, making him into a partner or making him into a risk taker? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor József. Any other questions in the audience at this point? No? Okay, we move on to the yes, sorry. Yes, didn't go the full circle, and that's when you miss it. Please.
Thank you. My name is Miodrag Milošević. I am from the Faculty of Political Science in Belgrade. I have a question for Ambassador Hill. So we actually see that the Kosovo problem is the main issue that needs to be sorted to have stability in the region. So we had different proposals. We had splitting up Kosovo, exchange of territories, community of Serbian municipalities. But I think that there was not too much talk about consociation. That term was a lot used in the 1990s and not today. We know that the Bosnian War and conflict in North Macedonia were solved by some kind of consociation, and I'm especially focusing on liberal consociation of North Macedonia that fairly functioned quite well. There were some crises, especially during the, rule of Gruevski, but after SDSM came to power, the real progress was made. So why there is no talk of consociation in Kosovo or in Serbia? Is the West disappointed by the Macedonia's result, or is there something else? Thank you very much.
Consociationalism. Consociationalism. Consociationalism.
Consociationalism, yes.
Yeah.
Any other? I can handle that one from the Macedonian side. That's all for this point, just to make sure I'm not missing anyone here. Okay, Ambassador Hill, 2 questions, not the easiest ones.
So I think what the U.S. is trying to do very hard is to try to find a solution. Now, Mr. József, I think you have some thoughts on where the problem lies. And I do have personal thoughts on that, but I'm not, when I speak publicly, and I don't really use Twitter, I'm sorry, X, I mean, I understand the role of kind of public messaging, but I think what these problems really have to be addressed in traditional diplomatic channels. And what I can assure you, and I can assure everybody in this room, that we do that, and we do that quite vigorously. What we need is a restoration of dialogue. To get that, you need to make sure you have de-escalation. You need to have a commitment to a give and take of that dialogue. It's not been easy. It's not been easy. Anyone who thinks people doing it or somehow not doing their jobs, they should try it for a few minutes. It's not easy. But this issue has to end with a political settlement. And you may have views on who should be running Serbia, whatever. I leave those to the Serbian people to resolve. What I try to do is deal with who I have to deal with, make my government's position clear, and believe me, I have done that, and try to get to a point where we can reduce not only de-escalation of forces, but also de-escalation of tempers, so that we can find a solution going forward, because this issue has to be solved through some political mechanism, and it's a very elusive concept, but we have to pursue it.
Can we have a short reflection on the second question of power sharing? Is it not the consociationalism moment?
Oh, that's what.
Okay.
Sorry, that's why I'm not in a university here, but. Power sharing where?
In Kosovo and Serbia, if I got it right, has the US given up on a more Macedonian type of a model of power sharing?
Power sharing, domestic, internal power sharing. I mean, I think these are very tough questions that countries are being asked to address, such as Macedonia's constitutional issues. The issue of Kosovo for Serbia, tough issue here. It's a tough issue in Pristina as well. The broader the representation that you have, so that everyone kind of takes a share of finding the answer, is often the way to do it. But the problem with this sometimes is you try to get different elements together, and you get another form of diplomacy, which is lowest common denominator diplomacy, where you don't get the kind of bold decisions that you need. It's not easy, so I'm kind of reluctant to set it out as a model that will, one size fits all. Generally speaking, I would like to see governments as broadly representative as they can be.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I don't see any hands, so the other aspect that we did not cover in this panel are actually the external threats. So I would like to ask first Mr. Sarrazin I think we have enough internal threats, but let's go a bit to what are the primary external threats that you see for the region, and are they the same for all the countries? Can we consider there is a joint one or not?
Well, Russia, China, to a certain extent. I don't know if you think Turkey is external or internal regarding the region. A bit, perhaps, the Gulf states. In certain measures, sometimes perhaps even Iran. But I think the main point, since Churchill, it's clear that it was always between us and the Russians to look on the Balkans, and now the Chinese are coming up. And it's difficult to wage these threats to a certain extent. Yeah? I'm from Hamburg, and I witnessed like 30 years of opening up our harbor for the Chinese as well. And then I'm going around and telling to everybody, guys, that's bad, but I think in the end, the people are deciding for us clearly. The Russian disinformation is strong and the Chinese investment is strong. And now we can think about what is the stronger tool to disrupt our idea of an order. Is it disinformation or is it investment? I think this discussion on BRICS is to a certain extent sexy in the region. And sometimes perhaps we underestimate that sexiness of models is in the region more relevant than we think, perhaps. But I still believe that the European Union is the Bavaria Munich in the league. And we are still in the pitch having all capabilities to win if we bring our performance on the pitch. And we get you, of course, also doing your performance.
Thank you. Mr. Davidoiu, from the other side of,
yes,
of Europe.
Definitely, and speaking about external threats, so the actors are pinpointed out already in various ways. The problem is how we see these threats, how we see which are the strategic threats that we have there, which are the tactical threats, and which are the means to which these threats are manifesting throughout the region. Because we can see people that have a strategic interest through disinformation, to hybrid campaigns, to undermine the security and the stability in the region, and to interfere in order to fuel up conflicts, be it national or even regional. We see people that have agendas, they are mainly economic agenda or other types of agenda that are wishing to take advantage of these opportunities that are there. We see some other people that have some punctual agendas, and we are not speaking because there are a multitude of actors. Some of them are even countries from our region or from the neighborhood of the region that has vested influence, either historical or particular transactional or other kind of influence, interest in some countries in the region. In the case of Bosnia, in the case of Montenegro, in some other places. We see, on one hand, various forms of hybrid attacks, starting from cyber disinformation and so on, and we see some other mildly issues like its political persuasion, like its investment-driven agendas, and so on. So it's a very complex issue that we definitely have to have a look on it, also from a security perspective, and that's why NATO is also very interesting for seeing this, and also the European Union that has set up even mechanism of dealing with this in the Western Balkan countries.
What can the EU do more for this?
For this, so, I mean, yes, it was the fact that when there is a void, so there is a tendency for this void to be filled.
The window.
We have seen, probably in a few years ago, a certain void in terms of major engagement of the EU in the region that created the premises of various actors to become more active in the region and more influential through various channels. But I think that the EU is doing quite a lot right now. So definitely, I sincerely believe now, and this is not rhetoric, that in the last year and a half, every EU is doing quite a lot of things, and even has had the Berlin process that is going to have its summit right now. The Berlin process was a catalyst for major regional cooperation between the partners with the European Union, setting up an economic agenda that is a transformative agenda, and it's also a prerequisite for taking up the acquis and getting into the European Union. So the EU is doing quite a lot. So all the EU delegations, as far as I know, have in their tasking a strategic communication. Some are doing it better, some are doing the EU delegations throughout the region. So the EU is doing quite a lot. I think NATO is also doing in its capacity quite a lot, and all our member states are trying to cope with all these influences, particularly those that are malignant, because there could be also some beneficial influences or some mere interest in the region.
Thank you. That brings us to Mr. Pandur. How much are these external threats making your job more difficult?
Well, let's just go back to the 24th of September. What happened on that day, and the news spread on the same day and the next days. There were a lot of rumors about Wagner, Russian influence participating even in Banska in the shootings. So this shows very well that where everybody expects the threats come from. Well, yes, there are some countries, not regionally wider, who are not really interested in the success of the dialogue because they need crisis. And as Mr. Sarrazin said, Russia, for example, one of them. How to say, this is only on the political level, nothing much, as I see.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hill.
I think the challenge of Russia in this region, in this country, is a very real one. I don't think Russia has much to offer, and I have to be quite frank about that. You see them very active when they're hopeful that there are more problems with Kosovo because they consider that an opportunity for them. This is not a serious position to take, and yet that is what this Russian Federation does these days. I have no doubt this country, I have no doubt that the rest of the countries have to join two organizations, the European Union and NATO. These organizations have some high standards, and it's tough, but it's worth going through them, and that's the point we make every day here in Serbia. This is where these countries' futures ought to be. I don't think there's another alternative. I don't think there's any third way, and certainly there's no road to Moscow that's been closed for what look like pretty permanent repairs at this point. These countries need to move west, and the sooner people understand that, the faster they can go. And our job is to try to help them on that way. You know, in all of these countries, as I said, there are these historical factor endowments. Lecturing them is probably not going to get you very far. Telling them what to do has its limits. But showing them the way forward and encouraging them to take that difficult path is absolutely what we should be doing. Everybody in this region, Kosovo especially, being one of the smallest elements there is, needs the countries around it to be good members of the European Union and good members of NATO. And so one would hope that we can continue to work that. It is not easy because not everyone shares that consensus, and there's some history that we all have to get through, but I have no doubt this is the way to go.
Thank you, Ambassador. Are there any questions at this point? I would really like to...
Simonida, if I may jump in for one.
Yes, please.
I mean, regarding the Russia point, I think there are two things to say. I mean, we see today that Russia is even not able or willing to protect a peace deal which they made 2 years ago in the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict about two former Soviet Union republics, because they're so busy in the war in Ukraine, or they have also a different assumption about deals with other partners we were just talking about. So who thinks that this guy Putin would stick to Serbia in the end? You know, like the Serbs are saying NATO, the West betrayed us regarding independence of Kosovo, but does anybody really think that Russia would stick to Serbia when it's out, not anymore in their own interest? The second is, I think what's more happening in the moment is that what's more dangerous for me is that the Serbian society is driving more apart than perhaps even the Serbian politics regarding the war. And that the assessment, the mindset of what's happening in the war, in the society in Serbia and also in the Srpski Svit influence area is getting a really totally different reality than what I think it's real. And I think that this can be really, really dangerous on a mid-run, especially when the war is coming to an end with the success of Ukraine, and then things are going fast, that, you know, the societies are brought to a state of thinking, of believing what is reality, which will not really be able to fit into that model then. And so I think the Russian threat is in the moment very much also that they try to use the war for splitting the Serbian society even further and us from the Serbian society even further. That's what they always did since Lenin wrote in 1905. And I have the fear that the situation in Israel now can be used exactly for that, not only in the Balkans, also in our countries. But I think the main threat is that they try to split societies via the religion stuff now. And I think this is perhaps not aimed at the Western Balkans. Yesterday, you know, in Berlin, you know the situation here with people making demonstrations for Hamas and the reaction on it. But this can be really feeding into a discussion in the region, which is quite culturalistic and can be really, really dangerous in reaching results and pragmatism, also regarding regional cooperation. And I'm a bit afraid about that.
Thank you, Manuel. I think, yeah, we are all afraid as to the different realities that we see. Also because here a couple of times Russia was mentioned as an alternative. I asked the question threat, so I don't think that many of us see it as an alternative. So I think that it's also the way that we kind of frame issues. Do we have any questions, or shall I pose some of mine in case I'm not missing anyone? This is a dark, yes, there are a lot of questions. Yes, Jelica Minic, please. I was right, yeah? It's Jelica, yeah. Can we pass the microphone, please, to Ms. Minic? It's coming. Tu je, gospođa. Hvala.
Is the increase of NATO troops in the region the solution? This is my question. Because people understand the meaning of power.
Thank you, Ms. Minic. Any other questions? Yes, there is one at the back, please. Thank you. There's two at the back, probably, but you can pass it on.
Milan Nič, German Council of Foreign Relations. I didn't want to ask questions because I think it's the role of people here from Belgrade to use the chance to the panel, but let me try to help and ask something to Manuel in Hamburg. This is not a very good time to have to have a Berlin Process Summit in Tirana. Still, there is a date. On Monday, the leaders will meet. And I want to ask you if you can share with us if all the leaders from the Balkan Six, including President Vučić and Prime Minister Kurti, are going to be there. And what is the level of expectations from Tirana Summit now?
Thank you, Milan. That was my last round of questions. You just took it. We have a second one, right, or no? Oh, yes, there is one, sorry, yes.
Yes, hi, Isabel Ioannidis from the European Parliament's Research Service. It's not really a question, but it's a comment. And sadly, I don't feel that you're not transmitting an urgency to deal with these issues. And that really worries me, because you agree on the external threats. They're many and they're very serious. And I think, if anything, what we see with the Israeli-Palestinian problem blowing up in our face is that if you leave a problem to rot, it will blow up in your face. So, you know, I'm quite worried that this is not dealt with enough seriousness. And just to say that, you know, it's complicated on the ground, no. I mean, we have a panel with people who are politically responsible, and you are in the region. So I would hope that, if anything, give more of a sense of an urgency that something needs to be done, and more concretely, what is being done. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. We have 8.5 minutes to answer the question of more NATO troops in the region, what is expected from Monday in Berlin, and yes, I used the word scared. I gave the conflicts, but I didn't push this one so enough. So thank you, Isabel, for posing this question. Oh, there is one more. Okay, you will have less time to respond, so please try to respond to all of these questions in a minute and a half. Yes?
Yeah, this is Birgül Demirtaş, Turkish-German University from Istanbul. My question is related to transatlantic cooperation. I mean, we know it from history that whenever there is a cooperation between the United States and the European countries, there is more possibilities to solve regional and global problems. And my question is, what is the current state of cooperation between the United States and the European Union to solve the problems in the Western Balkans, especially the problems in Bosnia-Herzegovina and the problems between Kosovo and Serbia? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. North Macedonia was the example of 2001 when the EU and NATO did this together, and the US. So shall we start with Mr. Sarrazin online? 2 minutes.
Well, I don't know exactly who will be there on Monday. I think in Serbia it would be the government taking care of it because it's a government cooperation, actually. But I know that, for example, Chancellor Scholz and President Macron will be there. So I think it's showing that we are taking it very serious. I think the big problem is that I mean, despite this vast majority of society in Serbia is against major steps for changing positively from our perspective on Kosovo, and vast majority in Kosovo is against delivering on ASMM, we need leaders who have the political will to deliver because of their own conviction it's the right way, and the political capability to push this through in their parties or in their home domestic ground. And now you can check yourself and see who of the leaders in which of the both countries is like promising to deliver that. And then I can clearly say we can try to do our utmost and best to give them opportunities, pressure, incentives, perspectives, sometimes perhaps even money, tough love or just love. But the political will cannot be substituted by us because in the end, it's like Ambassador Hill said, the pure advice has limits, especially in the region. And I think this limit has even grown as in the last time. So we tried to use the moment we had in Ohrid. Everybody says it's a quite great paperwork and we will not easily get something better, and try to make this work. Don't give up on it, but stick on it. And this is a clear transatlantic push together. I think we have not been often so close like we on this, especially with the cooperation between US and European Union even. So I think this is the right way to go. But it's clear also the summit on Monday in Tirana, it's tough times for having lucky pictures and great deliveries. But we keep on trying. We will not stop pushing. Yeah?
Thank you, Manuel. Ambassador Hill, more troops. That's the question that was not addressed by Manuel.
You know, every time I see NATO troops anywhere, I feel tensions go down. I think NATO is the world's premier security organization, and I think NATO very often contributes to the solution. NATO is very active on this issue. We just had Admiral Munch here from AF South, from Naples here, just on Tuesday. I know there are a lot of deliberations right now in Brussels to determine what the appropriate force level is. So in answer to your question, I think NATO is very seized with this as a really important and urgent issue. And with respect to the urgency, I mean, I worry a lot, but worrying is not a policy. What you have to look to is what you can actually put on the table that is reasonable. You're not going to be able to give one side what they want and stiff the other side. You're going to have to, this is going to involve give and take. And I think this is what Mr. Lajcik's been trying to do, and I think he's got some pretty good ideas. And you know, there's a lot of talk about him being here soon with a pretty robust delegation. And I think all of that speaks to the urgency, the need to find a solution. I must say, transatlantic cooperation. Boy, we've had our moments with Europe in the past, but right now I think the wake-up call was Ukraine, and as Ukraine goes, so goes the rest of us. We need to stay together. We need to hang together or we'll hang separately. So we need to be together, and I don't think there's been a time in recent history like the time today. And I'll say one other thing. I think the countries in the Balkans, you know, I understand the issues here. I understand the sort of local issues, but they need to also be thinking about some of these broader issues. It's often called in the jargon of the EU alignment. There does need to be alignment, but there has to be sort of meaningful alignment. I was very pleased, for example, when Greece put together a meeting in which President Vučić and President Zelensky were able to get together and actually have a serious bilateral. I think there needs to be more of that and more substance to that. And we can't just look at the Western Balkans as some problem on its own and absolve the participants of really meaningful participation in the issues that for us are existential, and the first one, namely this Ukraine situation.
Pandur.
Thank you. About the transatlantic cooperation, let me say that the EU and the US have a long and very productive history of close cooperation in the Western Balkans, as well as in the process of the normalization between Serbia and Kosovo. For us, it's very important that the US ready to accept the position that, for instance, in the dialogue, that the dialogue is a European issue, and that the European Union should lead and they should support. And we have all the support we need at what can be given from the US. Everybody knows that EUSR Lajčák visited several times together with Mr. Escobar the region. We are actually expecting very soon another visit together, and this close cooperation with the US was very important to have. I know that in this moment it's really hard to talk about the results, that we have results in the dialogue in the last couple of years, and for these results the support of the US was very important.
But is there urgency?
Sorry?
Is there urgency? Do you feel the urgency? Because that was the question, I think.
The urgency, yeah. Yes, of course.
Okay. Mr. Davidoiu.
Yeah, briefly. So I want to comment on the transatlantic tie, because I think this is quite obvious, that we not share only a common sense, a common strategic sense right now, based on Ukraine, but also a joint agenda here in the Western Balkans and for many other issues of cooperation. So as regards NATO, NATO is by definition a security provider for Europe. NATO has members. We should not forget that NATO has members throughout the region. It's a ring of NATO members in the region. And we have KFOR there, which is the security guarantor for this particular conflict. And I can tell you that Romania has already brought lately, together with UK, an additional contingent of troops there, and we believe that we have to maintain a strong and robust capability there, not necessarily a big one, but a one that would be fit in order to deal with this security. And in terms of urgency, this is a very good question. I would say that we conveyed, everybody of our conveyed this sense of urgency, which is a dual urgency. On one hand is the urgency driven by the external developments there, that is the war in Ukraine and all the other negative developments, but it's also the urgency driven by the fact that it is a window of opportunity, particularly this year for the region, to move forward in a substantive manner. We shouldn't forget the fact that things are moving quite fast on the international stage. We shouldn't forget the fact that we are going to have European elections in many EU member states, including in my own and in several big member states, and many other developments, elections in the respective countries. So definitely, I think it's an urgency there, and we are trying not only to convey this message of urgency, but the need to get to work substantively on this respect.
Thank you. On that note, I'm getting an urgent message that we are 2 minutes longer than what we should have. So, oh, Manuel, yes, I can't say no to you.
Let me make one more comment to blow it all up on urgency. We have a situation that since June we are waiting for a new government to be established in Montenegro, the country where the politicians promised to bring the country to EU in 5 years. We have a situation that North Macedonia is not able to deliver on the constitutional change due to, however, which is adding some minorities into the constitution, or the EU process is to a certain extent unfortunately blocked. We have a situation that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Dodik now said he will block all legislation, so no reform work. And in Serbia, I don't know how many sessions of parliaments took place, and we have now seemingly new elections coming up. So, I mean, and you're talking to us about urgency. I think that the urgency has to be understood also in the region. If you don't deliver now, perhaps in 2 years the war is over, and then history will be very, very fast. But European Union will still look for, do you have the institutions who do certificates for meat production to join the single market? And not only is it a political moment to do so, because our farmers will look very exactly if you were urgent enough to deliver on the reforms on the ground.
Thank you, Manuel. On that note, I hope that the farmers will get some insight from Monday as well. With this constructive ambiguity and this different interpretation of urgency, I leave you. Thank you a lot for being a wonderful audience. I want to thank the speakers, and we should really leave this spot because the next panel is starting in a minute. Thank you.